Welcome to the State of Blockchain Africa. This is a weekly podcast that aims to blend discussions on blockchain technology and its application on businesses and the digital economy. The focus is to help you better navigate the weird and wonderful world of Web3, NFTs, metaverse, and cryptocurrencies through conversations with some of the smartest minds that are creating the future. I will be your host, Linda I.A. Obi. Welcome on board. Joining me today is the fabulous Monalisa Agbata. She is the Director of Marketing at Zenith Chain, a Layer 1 blockchain ecosystem. We also have Franklin Peters, who is fondly called the Blockchain Oracle. Franklin is a blockchain expert and the Chief Executive Officer of Boundless Pay, a secure application that turns your cell phone into a mobile bank. And we have Eric Osuorah, who is building Afoma. Afoma is a social impact ecosystem that will enable artisans across Africa transition to Web3. And the hot topic today would be Nigeria and the recent cash withdrawal limit imposition and just, driving the CBDC. Welcome to the show, Monalisa. Welcome to the show, Eric. Franklin is having a bit of a challenge, so I think he's going to join us as we go along. How are you doing now? Eric, hi, Canada.
We're cold. Let's put it that way. It's cold here, but we can't complain because I rather stay in the cold than the heat you guys are enduring in Nigeria right now.
Are you
But it's all
sure?
good.
Are you sure?
Mona Lisa just rolled her eyes. She's like, whatever, So it's all, it's all good. I honestly, well, I mean, it really depends on the perspective of the individual, right? But knowing I've been in Nigeria on holiday sometimes. I do
Mm-hmm.
not look forward to that extreme heat. So I when I'm there for 2 days, I'm crying. Please, can I go back to Canada as soon as possible?
All
But yeah,
right,
it's all
okay.
good. Good. Thank you.
That's fine. That's fine. Mona Lisa, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing fine, doing great. Nice to be on the show. Just as Eric said, it's hot here. I'm not sure it could actually get hotter, but we are pulling through.
You're welcome. So, like I said, the topic under discussion would be, the recent cash withdrawal
Yeah.
limits and the imposition, across Nigeria. As we know it now, Nigeria has moved to cap withdrawals to $45 per day in a bid to push the adoption of E-Naira, which is Nigeria's central bank's digital currency. I think the withdrawal regime is also coming with, a weekly cap of 100,000 naira. Now, I know that I can begin to expand on how this affects me as an individual, as a retail consumer, and I think that I speak for most Nigerians, right? What do you make of this? Really, do you see this withdrawal imposition, like experts are calling it now? Do you see it as that vehicle that we need to foster the adoption of the e-naira, or do you think it's going to push people? They're going to get the exact opposite, with the policy that's been enacted. Eric, I'm going to let you answer this question, and then we'll move on to Mona Lisa.
Sure. So I like to take a look at, when this news broke out, the natural reaction is for people to go, they've come again. This country, this
Mm-hmm.
government, they've come with their wahala and all whatnot. But if you really sit down and digest the goal, the intention, you probably start asking yourself, there is something, there's a purpose behind this.
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria is predominantly a cash-based system, right? We need to move away from driving cash. I know people are going to say this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He lives in Canada. He should just keep his mouth shut and all whatnot. But listen, the world is changing every day, right? And we can't keep playing catch up all the time. If we are truly about enabling people and all whatnot, we need to start really moving away from these cash-based environments, not just from a security standpoint, right? But if we're trying to integrate and work with, collaborate with businesses and investors and all whatnot, we need to start finding ways to leverage technology to actually drive us into that space. So I think that and as a Nigerian, we like to always work. We're very slow adopters. We want to wait until they tell us, yeah, today is the last day, or, go and get it done. We need to, I think the approach the government is taking now is they're forcing our hand to actually, because if you say, oh, start using E-Naira, nobody's going to do that. Nobody will. So I think their approach is now they are forcing people's hands. The question is now, is this the right time to do this when inflation is on the rise, poverty is on the rise? I think this is where we needed to ask ourselves. I think the intention is not bad. The question is the timing right? Right? That's really the question now. I think if maybe people were more prosperous, people were going well, and things were moving along, the economy was doing okay, then we start bringing in these policies, then I think the impact is not huge, right? People are looking for money to go and buy food in the market. Now you're now reducing access to their funds because you want to force them to leverage technology, right?
Exactly.
That's where I have an issue, right? So, but I'll let Monalisa to chime in here, but that's my thought on it.
Marisa, need to hear your thoughts.
Okay, so I have two things. The agenda is very nice. It's a very creative way of making an average Nigerian jump on the train for cashlessness and just moving progressively into where other clients have all got to. What I do worry about is about the strategy, the execution, which is where we always, things like the government always falter, no matter how excellent an idea is, an ideology is, somehow they just get to that execution line and they do not get it right, right? So I worry about the execution, the modalities, how they are going to actually, beyond presented papers, beyond exciting narratives and the rest of them, how are they actually going to make this effective and who knows, maybe stress-free for an average Nigerian in the streets? It points to things like education, awareness. I'm not sure the way we dabbled into this that we can actually effectively execute it with all of the nearing deadlines, December 9th, 31st December, out of cash circulation, old currency circulation, moving into cashless. It's just, the whole thing just came in like a pound, an average Nigerian. So I worry about the execution, if we are actually going to achieve that which the government had planned, or we're just going to inflict hardship on people for the sake of it.
Thank you so much for your view, Monalisa. Thank you so much, Eric. So experts are calling it the collapse of the, I mean, they're calling the entire move the collapse of the informal sector. Um, Especially because, the informal trade, I mean, the informal sector is very cash heavy with micro dispensing of cash at, every level. Yeah, and then this is coming with, as Monalisa has said, there is this deadline, there is the other deadline, there's this other deadline. And we also know that the informal sector, significantly contributes to the GDP as we know it, the GDP level as we know it, 1.166 billion, I think, dollars as we know it. Do you think that it is a fair assumption, and the narratives being pushed by experts to say that this might be the collapse of the informal sector as we know it here in Nigeria? Do you think that this, I mean, the assumptions here are right? And Monalisa, I want you to go first on this.
I don't think it's right. I think it's going to be difficult, but it may not necessarily point to a total collapse of the informal sector. And yes, people have their own pessimistic views about the whole thing. But what I do believe is that somehow along the line, the informal sector will catch up, depending on how the government executes this. Everything borders on execution strategy, having it in bits, how to progress beyond this first stage, the announcement stage, to the actual execution, to the remodeling, if there is a need for any remodeling. Because I think ultimately what the government wants to achieve cashlessness. It's not just they don't just want to put out rubber stamp policies that are not adjustable if there is any need for it. So I do not think that it would lead to a total collapse if the government is actually willing to blend where necessary and to actively like be proactive in the whole process, making sure that the informal sector is carried along. I'm not sure they are properly carried along. You find that an average person in the street, like if you have to go to the interior places where the cash cash usage is very heavy, they don't even understand what you're talking about. Some have not heard it for the first time up until now. So the awareness is quite poor. I believe that if properly managed, it should not, it will not. But then, looking at history, looking at how we've always done things, we have a history of haphazardness starting from the point of the government. If they can actually pay more attention, this is a very deep, very very deep policy they are driving. It's not an average policy that affects maybe the upper class and the rest of it. If they are going to be thorough with the execution, it will not.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Keen to hear your thoughts also, Eric. Franklin, I'm not sure your internet is stable now. Do you have a stable internet? Can you hear me, Franklin? Okay, so moving on to Eric. What are your thoughts? Do you see these assumptions as fair, and that would be speaking to the collapse of the informal sector as we know it? What are the direct impacts as you see it?
First of all, I agree with Monalisa. I don't think it will be the collapse of the informal sector. I actually think it will enable the informal sector. I believe that as Monalisa touched on, there has to be that education side of things, right? But you can train and educate people as much as possible, but there is no better experience or educator than real life experience, right? You
Exactly.
can teach them all you want, tell them, oh, E-Naira, you know how they do the commercials in Nigeria. They will be singing some jingle there and you're learning and all that stuff. But there's nothing better than the real experience where you're actually using your mobile phone, you're doing this, you're doing that. So the one thing though is that for this to work, right, for the informal sector to work, especially if you're trying to introduce a cashless, because the goal, as Monalisa pointed, is that they want to drive a cashless system. That is the goal, right? That is not a bad thing. The issue, though, is you have to make sure that you're leveraging the infrastructure to support it, right? Because when you're talking about E-Naira, are they using USSD to drive that? Are they going to use smartphones to drive that? Are they using apps? How many people have access to a smartphone, right? So are they leveraging the right technology that people are used to do that, right? So the question is, for this to flow, personally, I think it will enable the informal sector here in Canada. They still have informal sectors, right? There are artisans here, right? But they are doing very well, right? But the technology exists, and all whatnot. Because let's be honest, there is the statistics you pulled out. The informal sector in most developing countries is the engine behind their GDP,
I
right?
agree.
It's not the folks working at the banks. It's not the guys that have access to
Yeah,
telecoms.
essential
It's the
providers,
informal
yes.
sector that is driving. Like I think from a statistics I pulled, Nigeria's informal sector is driving about over 50% of its GDP, right?
Very
So
true.
they need to look at what to do, and I think this is the right approach, because I think as they start driving, leveraging technology, or to enable this informal sector, they are actually going to generate more revenue for them at the end of the day.
I couldn't agree more. Eric, I can't agree more. But expanding on this thought, right? Mona Lisa, I picked where you said that you would like to see policies that are a bit friendlier. What kind of policies? I mean, what do you think really when it comes to innovating in Nigeria? You know how we sleep and wake up, and then there's this policy, and the whole sector is down, and then you wake up the next day and then it's a target at another sector and the whole sector is down, right? And from a personal standpoint, I would say that the rush to start the whole frameworking of our CBDC would be riding on the volume that was transacted out of Africa, Nigeria precisely. If you look at the transactions out of Passful in 2021, I mean, we saw a lot of crypto adoption, right? It was staggering numbers. And then we woke up one day and we realized that crypto founders can no longer do anything. Or exchange founders, you know how it was when we were not sure whether crypto is a sin or crypto is not a sin. We don't know which one it was, or I don't even think it's so clear what the regulations around it is now. And I think that there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done around that. Education is first, but I mean, speaking to innovation, what kind of policies do you think? I know you work in the tech ecosystem, and we have been affected once, twice, once too many times, right? What kind of policies do you think the regulators should be looking into? Do we take excerpts from Western countries who have done this and are successful at success? What are the kind of framework you would like to see that enables, that ecosystem? Because I'd like to say that crypto is an extension of fintech, whether we like it or not. It's financial inclusion, one way or the other. Yeah, and policies around fintech should be favorable, I think. What are the kind of policies that you think the government should layer on, right? That kinds of promotes and fosters innovation. Frankly, if you're internet veteran, can you hear us? Okay, so Eric, do you want to take that, and then Monalisa goes after?
Sure. If it's in terms of policies, I think one is we have to the government needs to look at policies that will work for us. We don't need to adopt what the West is doing. The West, right? I think whatever policies that they have there, the infrastructure is different, the advancement in technology is
The climb is
different,
different.
the
Yeah.
climb is different. So we have to look at what works for us. For example, like us, as you know, my project around that former, right? We are
Yes.
targeting creatives who are in Nigeria that are trying to connect with people like us who are in the diaspora that are looking at buying their crafts and all whatnot, right? When you start putting these technologies in front of them, there's a bit of struggle, right? We're seeing that. And it's a testament to why anything we're creating, we have to build it to work for our people, right? So us now, we're putting the Niger hat and saying, how can we do this work? So now we're looking at, okay, we have to go and help them. Let's put up their products, write their descriptions, tweak their pictures and make it work. So we have to look at what works within for us. So I think the policies that I want to see is I think one, and I heard that we are now looking at regularizing, the crypto, within Nigeria in itself. That is one policy that I'm looking at that we want to definitely get to. I don't think the government needs to see crypto as an enemy or right or like, oh, this is going to impact our drive around CBDC. There are ways you can make these things work, right?
Yes.
Find incentives. Some people might say CBDC works for me. Some people will say crypto works for me. Find ways to. Let the market decide. Either ways, there is room for everybody to play in. We don't have to be greedy and say, nope, I don't want this guy to benefit. There is room for everybody. Nigeria's population is how many now? We're talking about I
Over
don't know what
200 million. Yes.
over 200 million. That's still a lot
Mhm.
of population that we can tap into, right?
Yes.
So
I agree.
I think at the end of the day, they have to look at policies where CBDC can flourish and leverage policies that crypto can flourish. And when I speak about these policies or regulations, they have to be built in a way where it is not squashing innovation at the end of the day.
I agree. I agree. I mean, Monalisa.
Okay, so just as Eric has stated, it's the only thing that can help the government achieve its purpose for this whole CBDC integration would be to actually come closer to fintechs. We have the capacity, fintechs have the technology, they have the market understanding. I'm not even sure. I don't know how I don't know how sometimes they come up with their policies, but fintechs have what it takes to actually drive this project, this whole CBDC project down to the last down to the most interior user in Nigeria. But they've not started exploring that because they are still suspicious. There has to be a very fine blend of the crypto economy, bringing them closer. Nothing of suspicion. I'm actually going for mentioning crypto. Talking about mainstream fintech, traditional fintech, they've struggled so much. We've seen people come and go. We've seen triangulation of fintech brands not being able to do much. How Bata by Flutterwave had to shut down Union 54, had there were lots of issues around regulations that forced fintechs out. These are the people who will successfully drive this. So if there could be a reconsideration of some of these, instead of staying borderline where people are not sure if it's a crime to do crypto or sure which way to go, bringing all of these together will make the policy. Actually, I'm looking at if there is a possibility that these things are achieved in the next 3 to 4 years, you would see this go mainstream like that. Like when we first had internet, 2G, 3G, you saw the speed at which all of those penetrated everywhere. Fintech have the capacity. So this is not something the government can execute alone in isolation. This is something that has to go round. Like they need to bring in the builders of fintech. It's new to them. That's the fact. It's new to them. And fintechs have developed extensive models that can actually help drive this. But somehow, most fintechs are still at loggerheads because of policies with the government. So once they are able to bring these different lines together, once they are able to ensure that fintechs are not afraid of operating in Nigeria, some of these will be easier to scale. That's how I'm looking at it. Look at the transaction limit placed on Mastercard and a lot of, and people are even suspicious that over time Mastercard might actually have more complications because the CBN is actually bringing in more and more. So instead of launching all of these products that are haphazard, bring in fintech, make it a government enterprise arrangement where everybody is free to contribute their own quota. I think if the real intention will be achieved, then this is just what they need to do. So it's not them executing it in isolation and trying to strangle fintechs out. Bring them in, make the regulation easier, bring in the business friendliness, and everybody will thrive. It will be easier for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree. I've always maintained that we as builders within the ecosystem, especially here in Africa, would need to first start setting out, the initial building block for what would now resemble, policy making that can be adopted by the central government. We understand the market, we understand the terrains, we understand the buyer persona, we understand what needs to be frameworked, right? I do think that I really lean into, you saying that they would need to work very closely with fintech, because I ask myself every time, I mean, what would they layer these policies on really, especially with, almost no knowledge on Bitcoin, almost no knowledge around decentralization. What do they really, or what would they really layer these policies on? So I mean, and that brings me to the next question, or I'm going to mention two questions in one. Do you think, I know that we have maintained and pointed out that, they would need to um lean into fintechs and what we are doing and around the ecosystem, what we are building, understand projects. Do you think that the CBN everywhere should, I mean, do you think they possess sufficient knowledge? And this is stepping out of Nigeria now. We're talking about Africa now as a whole, because this is supposed to cover Africa. Do you think that the CBN everywhere have, I mean, sufficient experience to regulate the space? And by regulating, I mean, enacting policies, writing policies, expanding on those policies. Do you think that they have that, they should be the one regulating the space? What are your thoughts around that? Because I see CBN, I mean, they're the apex bank, and all of these monetary fiscal policies are heavily rested on them, and we know that some of these policies are heavily flawed. Now we have crypto, right? We have the CBDC, which is supposed to, as much as we'd like to say it's not in competition with crypto, it's meant to do what crypto does, but it cannot, right? Because there is the layer or element of decentralization. Now, who should be the one regulating the space? Who should be the one writing the policy?
Okay,
Harry?
so
Yes.
okay,
Okay,
Harry.
Monalisa, go ahead.
Okay, so
Go ahead. You're going to.
I think the government can actually do it, but they can't do it in isolation. Right now, they are trying so hard to do it in isolation, and it's never going to work. It's almost a promise. So, if everyone can come down from their high horse, look at the industry, look at it critically, bring in the stakeholders, have very thorough discussions with them. Actually, governments actually discover these things on the go as they are happening. But the owners,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the builders,
Oh, yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. So governments sometimes discover this aspect of loophole and then they begin to chase it. They try to rectify it and then it busts out from another end and then they begin to chase that corner too. So they do not understand. They don't understand the technology so well, at least for now. So it's not something they can successfully do in isolation. They can't successfully regulate the crypto industry in isolation. So what they need to do, in my opinion, is let's come closer with the brands who are developing, because believe me, the brands know where the weaknesses are. They know where
Mm,
the challenge in the market all
mm,
reside. They know, they can anticipate even the problems that could come from this tech that we're all developing in the next 20 to 50 years. They have the roadmap. So you cannot regulate what you do not sufficiently understand. If they are able to bring in the fintechs closer, bring in these people who are creating this product, they can tell you the loopholes that there are. And collectively, with some kind of agreement, instead of acting like how do I put it? Instead of acting like the father of the house, right? The olden days father who everything is hidden away from, and then they discover damage control and all. It's best to come closer to the people who are developing these products. Let it be a stakeholder agreement that we want this industry to work. You're not doing your regulation because you want to strangle the industry. You're doing it because you want to work. You want it to last. You want people to benefit from it. Once they are able to do this, I think everything will work out. The regulation will work out. There will be friendly regulation that would actually be in the interest of users.
from your lips to God ears. From your lips to God ears, Mona Lisa. Eric, what's your take on that? What's your take on of her position?
I don't know if I can beat what Mona Lisa said. So
Uh-huh.
I think she has pretty much covered, everything she has said is the same thing I would definitely, point out, right? The government is the ones to generate these policies, but they have to work with the folks who are already there. The government's resources, I don't want to use the word unlimited, but they have the potential to bring in the brightest minds and all whatnot.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
yeah, you can
mm-hmm.
bring in the brightest mind as much as you want, but you also want to hear from the private sector. What are they doing there? The guys who are in the fintech, who are dead, connecting with the everyday people, right? What is the appetite? What appetite are they getting there? Because you might sit down, the brightest mind might have very good intentions, create these regulations because they feel this is what will benefit us as a country, benefit us globally. But they're not feeling, they have no understanding of what's happening with the everyday individual that is connecting with the fintech companies that are in Nigeria as well. So I think they have to definitely come down from wherever they are, Osuorah, wherever, and bring people into the same table, and let's figure out how all these things work,
I
and let's
agree.
make it
Oh, I agree. I agree.
work for everybody.
Yes. So I'm going to ask a very straightforward
Just to
question.
add
Yeah, go
one
ahead.
more thing. Just
Mhm.
to add one more thing, I think a lot of things. I know the industry is fast paced. I know the whole thing is evolving too fast, but I see a lot of hasty declarations that are supposedly regulations, and that is actually harming more than it's helping. Right? When something happens, and instead of going out to declare, oh, this one is banned, the other one is banned, oh, this is new, why not take time to understudy? Right? From the little they are actually doing at the moment. Why not take time, understudy what just happened, do sufficient consultation before actually making some of these proclamations? Because sometimes I feel that if we have to mirror the government's mind, you find that they too are aware that they've made quite some mistakes while trying to regulate the ecosystem, which they too might
Yeah.
not be. proud of. So it's something to reflect on for everyone when the industry is developing so fast. But if they can just lean in a bit, just take a little more time instead of making random decisions that are supposed to be regulations that doesn't even favor them, doesn't favor the fintechs, doesn't favor the users.
I mean, you just picked my brain a bit. I was going to say that, with all these regulations that are seemingly half baked, yeah, do you see a push towards crypto, like, blue chip crypto, and by crypto I mean Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the likes, or do you see, the adoption of the CBDC, which is in this case is the E-Naira? Anybody can go at this question.
Okay,
Yeah.
let Eric go first, please.
Honest
Okay. Yeah.
opinion. Honest
You know,
opinion. Yeah.
as they say, ladies first, but since she has passed it on to me, I will accept.
Okay.
So yes, I honestly believe crypto is inevitable. Um, if I was a betting man, I would probably say that yes, that we are probably heading towards where will have a place in Nigeria.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if the government is honest and truthful to themselves, they would take this a bit more seriously, right? Like the US government is already looking at regulation. And when I don't know if it's a bill from one of their lawmakers that they proposed. When I read that, I was like, Jesus, is this America? Is this some country like Dubai that the bill was like, it seemed very friendly and welcoming, you know. Um, and I think the government needs to really look at this and say, listen, this technology is not going away. It is here to stay. How can we make it work, right? I read an article the other day. Some lawmaker, I think in India, was saying complete abortion, of crypto, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
What's the governor of their reserve bank making that
Why?
assurance?
Exactly. Like, why do you want to be doing these things? Now, don't get me wrong. Crypto, cryptocurrency has had its bad players. Fiat has had its bad players as well, right? What we need to do is find a way to make this tech more safe. We are still, I know crypto has been, how long has crypto been? It's not as old as fiat. I
It's
mean, we're
11
not,
years, right?
right?
12 years.
11 years. It's
12
still a
years.
child, It's still a child, right? It's not, people have been
The
doing
space
this
is
for
still
that
young.
long. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're still young. The technology is still young. It's still in its infancy. Well, I wouldn't say infancy,
Yeah.
but you get what I mean. I mean, eventually it will get better and better and better. The only way it will improve, government needs to step in, right? Government needs to step in and say, how can we make this thing safe? How can we make it trustworthy at the end of the day? Because let's be honest, when I sit down with Flutterwave now, which is an amazing company, right? Right? And I want to send money to or remit money to someone else, that money they are taking from that artisan is not small. That money, something there more, sure you get,
Of
right?
course.
So at the end of the day, when you leverage crypto and you see, my God, I just sent $1,000 and we're talking about 0.001 or 13 cents. I'm like, what the hell is this? It's a no-brainer. So we have to start looking at ways. We want to make this thing more safer. I think it's opening the door for crypto. I think it is making the case for crypto. But the adoption has to for the adoption towards crypto to really flourish, government has to step in. Its application, it has to be applied towards real world issues, not all this ridiculousness that we see where somebody wake up one day and create a meme coin and whatever, it has no utility. And because that's what I see all over Twitter. I'm like, Jesus, what's going on Twitter? You see all these
It's
traders
crazy.
saying this like a wild west. You're
It's
seeing all these people
crazy.
meme coin. They will see, oh, I have $10,000 now. Boom, they make out and they pull out. I'm like, this is the problem with this tech. It's been seen. And don't get me wrong, when you go into the New York stock market, it's almost like that. It's like madness everywhere. This trading here, trading here, trading here. But at least there's some sort of regulation there. Something goes wrong, someone is held accountable. I think we need to
Mm.
bring that as well. on the crypto side. So that's pretty much my thought. I think there is a space. I think it is making the case for crypto, but it has to be done the right way.
Profound, really profound. Monalisa, do you want to share your thoughts on it?
Sure. So I think currently why CBDC is not yet flourishing is because they've not blended it into the crypto economy. What actually keeping people away from it is suspicion on both sides. On one hand, the government thinks that crypto is there to spoil the economy, crypto is there, it's all bad and stuff. And then the people on the other hand think the government is bringing in CBDC so that they can ultimately hijack the industry, stuff like that. So everybody is standing at their own edge, strongly on their opinion. That's why CBDC is not moving forward so far. So for it to actually effectively work, it has to blend effectively into the crypto economy, and this has to ride on the back of very friendly regulations that can actually sustain the industry over time. So it's not something the government can do in isolation. Friendly policies, bringing it closer to the economy, and then creating use cases that actually neatly blend into crypto. In a way, for instance, if in Nigeria, they make it in a way that, yes, this becomes friendly and maybe become a part of the crypto.
I think we lost Mona Lisa.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, Eric, let's just proceed with the final question. While she tries to join in, I know that you are a respected thought leader within the blockchain ecosystem. And I usually would say that there are two blockers to scale crypto adoption, right? I do think that whatever templates, whatever framework, right, that is being drawn up for crypto can also form like the building block of whatever template they want to draw for CBDCs. But I do also feel like there are two blockers to mainstream adoption. One would be that education is really lacking, and the other would be so one would be education, the other would be regulation, right? Education, and I mean education across all layers and all tiers of the economy. Education from a grassroots education of regulating officers, education of the retail users, education of institutional adopters, and the likes. And then with that education, we can now start to framework regulations that are progressive. Yeah, I think that those are the two charter pillars. However, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on how, right? We have identified that these are blockers, right? But how should the government start? I know that there are a lot of the private sector have taken it upon themselves to start to educate. We know Binance is doing some kind of learn, crypto platforms, exchanges are doing a lot of learn around crypto and what it is, use cases, utility cases, and the likes. However, where should the public sector start from? Because I think that we need a holding of hands to properly educate before it becomes, mainstream. Yeah, Eric, I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
You are absolutely right. But this is not just a problem for the government. I think even the private sectors have a major role to play here. And I'll use our startup as a perfect use case, right? Um, when we started our former, and we know there is a demand, or we know that a demand exists there in terms of where we want creatives to be able to, connect with a global market, right? We know the demand is there, or even just scale within Nigeria in itself. And we felt that we wanted to leverage blockchain and crypto primarily for a number of reasons: establishing trust, moving them into creating intellectual property using NFTs, as you know, and then taking them into this virtual reality world, which I don't think the world is ready for until maybe 10 or
Mm.
15 years or 20 years from now. But we like to, as I always tell people, I like to start early, right? I always like to, before the gunshot hits off, I've already finished across the finish line. I want to get ahead, experience it, learn from people before this technology really adopts. But for us to do that, as you rightly pointed out, education has to happen. Today, we're asking artisans put up products on the marketplace for us to help you scale, right? When we say they are used to wear on Instagram, they put up pictures and they say, "Oh, see my bag, come and buy. You call me 905, whatever, whatever, whatever," right? Now the game is changing. Now we're telling them put out clear, beautiful pictures, write up proper descriptions of your product. They are struggling, right? They are struggling either because of maybe time or they are not used to things like this. So imagine bringing in now imagine the crypto side of it, right? So imagine where you're now telling people who are even struggling to understand a cashless based system. Now you're now telling them to understand how to do crypto, not to talk of even non-custodial wallets. They will say, "Okay, I give up. Oh, this thing will not work for me. I beg." There are people today that we're working with, artisans or creatives that we're working with, that are even struggling to even know how to reset their password. You get what I mean? So there has to be a lot of hand holding, as you rightly pointed out. Hand holding has to be there. It has to be part of every business model, especially if you want to look at a frontier market like in Africa or in Nigeria specifically. There has to be that hand holding, and we have to be patient and we have to understand that. That is one. Regulation, again, as we've talked about for the most part of this podcast, is the fact that the government has to be able to work with the private sector. What is lacking? Personally, if you ask me, what we're using today from a fintech perspective in Africa and Nigeria, um, uh, it's something that, yes, we're very proud of. Everybody's happy. Oh, look at the amazing thing M-Pesa is doing. Look at what Momo is doing. Oh, look at what Flutterwave is doing. These are amazing achievements. But I'll be honest with you, these are legacy. These are legacy technologies. This is old. These are old tech, right? Old tech when you compare it to what crypto can do, right? We are talking about matter of minutes. You're sending money. People now have control of their own digital assets. You don't have to sit down and wait for the bank to be open on a Sunday or on a Saturday. You're sending money at low transaction costs. This is the type of technology that we want to flourish. But for that to flourish, again, we have to get the government to work with us. The government has to look at there are fintech companies today that are doing things around, fiat and crypto. I interact with them almost on a frequent basis, and they are doing amazing work. The government, startups, VCs, they need to be looking at these companies too. When I first started early part of this year, VCs will come to me, and the minute I mention crypto, they will back away, right? But I think they're beginning to see that this tech is here to stay. There are people who are still very uncomfortable about it, but I think the private sector needs to start understanding that this tech, we should be paying attention to the impact of what this tech can do in people's lives, right? And the government has to do the same as well. So, in my closing thought is that you're absolutely right. Education, regulation is key, but there has to be a lot of hand holding. The private sector has a major, major role to play here. And, work with organizations like Economy Africa, some of the things that they are doing, and enable them. Nothing stops the government from seeing projects of what Economy Africa is doing and say, you know what? We can't do all this work. We can't do this work. Why don't we partner with these organizations, fund them? What do they need to drive this education? Incentivize the people that are learning. I think that's really what the government needs to do, and these are what private firms and VCs and all whatnot who are really serious about inclusion or financial inclusion. They need to be working with organizations that can help drive the understanding around this technology. Thank you.
I agree with you, Chris. I do think that a lot has to be done by the public sector to support the entire educational process. I'm working with a lot of schools now to just get introduction education into those schools, and it is a problem. It is not easy breaking into the schools, especially federal government schools or public government schools who are supposed to lean into free educational whatever like this. Absolutely. Right? It is the private schools that get it. So I do feel like A lot needs to be done. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining. Eric, rather, for joining the conversation. I don't know. I think Monalisa and Franklin are having some kind of network challenge. It has been an explosive conversation. And thank you, Lisa. If you get to listen, thank you, Eric. To everybody listening, like what you hear so far, make sure you never miss the show by clicking the subscribe button now. The podcast is made possible by our sponsors and listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support and see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.